Hell no! It's probably your response to the video title, unless you're a Bossku supporter, in which case then your answer is probably hell yes! Either way, the common denominator there is hell, and somebody's probably gonna go to hell, so we might as well ask, should we pardon Najib Razak? Suppose despite Shafi working his hardest and the Bossku fan club shaking their fists up and down for 25 charges including 21 charges of money laundering, 4 counts of abuse of power over allegations that 2.3 billion ringgit was transferred into his personal bank accounts through offshore entities. Najib just got sentenced to 15 years in prison and our sepup was fined 11.4 billion ringgit, in default of which he would serve 40 years in prison, beginning after the end of his current jail term ending in August 2028. Wow. All the Bossku supporters are crying right now in deep anguish as the Kami Cinta Bossku energy grows and grows and grows. But actually the reason I'm asking this question is because of a post from a friend of mine, and that is Dr. Ong Kian Ming. Now, you might have seen the articles by this point. DAP man slams tone deaf celebration, referring of course to Yo Bi Yin. But also, you would have seen the time for a serious talk on full pardon for Najib, says DAP man, referring to what Dr. Ong says, which goes at the bottom of this Facebook post that the man is currently getting skewered for left, right, front, and center. But anyway, right here it says, sixthly and finally, I think it is time, perhaps in the new year in 2026, for us to start a serious conversation about the possibility of a full pardon for Najib. Be like, what? Where he cites his Keluar Sekejap experience. Well, Zahid has been chillin' all the while, declaring that apparently KJ made a grand amnesty proposal on the 20th of August, which would entail not just a full pardon for Najib, but also dropping these cases, allowing a political reset, which in turn will be part of the process for greater political maturity, much needed for the country. Very idealistic, OKM, but respectfully, your attribution is wrong. First off, this suggestion came from Keluar Sekejap episode 43. It was not actually August the 20th, but rather August the 18th. But the more important thing is that the grand amnesty idea wasn't actually KJ's. That directly contradicts what KJ said because, in fact, he denied it 3 times in a row.
Cadangan. Saya sebenarnya tak setuju dengan cadangan ini. Tapi apa kata saya tak setuju because to me, if you do the crime, you do the time. Cadangan yang saya pernah dengar adalah grand amnesty. Pengampunan untuk semua.
Yang ketiga, yang paling controversial.
Grand amnesty.
Your grand amnesty plan.
Well, not mine. Okay. I heard somebody.
The same way Peter denied Jesus 3 times in a single night. Hashtag Merry Christmas. KJ believes a bit more in
If you do the crime, you do the time.
which frankly I agree with a lot more. Now, I prefer not to be the kind of guy who nitpicks over things like this, but I think it's pretty important to be factually accurate when you're reporting things like this, and it's something that I've told Dr. Ong about. I was actually thinking about whether or not I should really share this in the first place, but since it wasn't actually something that KJ suggested, I figured it was important to set the record straight. But still, taking the point that the man raised though, sure, that's an idea of a political reset, we can say. And again, we're back at the start where most of you will probably be like, hell nah, and the Najib supporters be all like, hell yes, as everybody goes straight to the Agong and hopes to rehabilitate our Najib sepup. Sure, he can possibly appeal, first at the Court of Appeal, then at the Federal Court, and Shafi can continue collecting his insane fees. A pardon would probably be the much easier way for things to go. But here's why I come in and say, if you are the young di-Pertuan Agong, or if you are any future young di-Pertuan Agong who will consider this question, daulat tuanku, but I think that you shouldn't. Tuanku, the power of pardon is a prerogative of the King of Malaysia. That is absolutely true. But just cause you can do something doesn't mean you should. There's also a question of what we want this country to be. Frankly, Tuanku, I think it's a double-edged sword. The legal reasoning of the judge was quite clear. And while it is true that we are a constitutional monarchy and the royal privilege coexists alongside our legal determination, we have plenty of reason to understand and believe that the Malaysian people would suffer an irreparable blow if you were to completely pardon Najib and say, look, this man will go free. And I say this not out of insubordination, but rather from understanding human nature, Tuanku. See, Tuanku, if you could pardon someone for an 11.4 billion fine, then could you not pardon people who are of much smaller stature? Everyone who had ever contravened the law in this country all the way? If you would pardon Najib, then what about every single other criminal, the murderers, the rapists, the killers, the petty thieves out there? It seems that that's what you kind of would want to do if you truly are a just king. A just ruler will lead the kingdom into a brighter future. And of course, there will be some who would think that if Najib were free, then the kingdom could come to even greater heights and a time of brighter light. But I urge you, Your Highness, to exercise your judgment in a way that brings us towards a higher ethical standard, an era where we demand more of our leaders, not less, where we push them to exercise integrity and not facilitate them and say that, well, if you do something wrong in the future, maybe we'll just pardon you and we'll let the thing go on and on again. That's not a recipe for a successful country, but instead for a very mediocre one. Now, I'm sure a lot of people want to talk about political persecution, whataboutism, and again about the Terawong case and any number of other things. And you know, I'm not unsympathetic to that. If you are a prime minister and you have no access to money for campaigning for whatever reason, then it may be rather hard for you to win an election, and that can compel you to do certain things that you might not have otherwise done. But I think all of you can see at the moment that, look, there's a full-on legal argument, there's evidence of what happened, and you can spend all of your time crying about Jolo, asking when and how he's going to be caught, or you can start making yourselves become better so that somehow or another you can continue the story of UMNO without looking back on a past that somehow you cannot seem to shake off. I mean, when we think about it, this is so sad. Like, why are you so caught up in dynasties when, if you think about it, it's not supposed to be about dynasties? Why do you need to go out there and idolize one single man, symbol of the greatest corruption that this entire country ever had, since that generations of Malaysians will continue to pay for through their tax revenues, and your fading memory of a time when things were better that you're crying and crying for every day because you're like that creepy ex-boyfriend who cannot move on with his life? Seriously, get a grip. Justice is justice, and if you're thinking that anybody out there that you like shouldn't receive justice because it's just not what you want, then you're just not going to advance to become an actual civilized country. Yes, talent is a limited resource. You can't just snap your fingers and then poof, new Najib, new KJ, new whatever the hell. But maybe that's because you're not looking inside yourself, always pining for the past, and you're stopping yourself from progressing. So here's my honest suggestion for you: stop it. I'm not gonna glorify the fact that Najib was charged or arrested, unlike some people out there. But on my part, I don't think that we should be pardoning Najib. Not because he's old, not because you're sad. I agree completely with the court judgment and the principle of deterrence and also the logic of the judge, which I think is going to hold no matter how many times Najib's legal team appeals. Please, for your sake, for my sake, and for the entire nation of Malaysia's sake, move on with your lives. I'm sure that your life could be better in some way, shape or form if you did have a pardon. Maybe it would help heal your broken ego. But trust me, even if you can't see it now, I feel like a better future lies beyond your just moving beyond all of this and actually taking your future in your hands. Not binding yourself to the shadows of the past that frankly are just now a distant memory. But what do you think, sepoops? Should we pardon Najib Razak? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. That's all to say about that, and bye.